Today, I am stepping away from my usual subjects to talk to you about the subject of fashion on a stick. In the age where 0 is the new 2 and people are going anorexic on all kinds of crash diets and they're still dissatisfied with their figure, where did this all start? How did this all happen? When did fashions become something that doesn't work for women? Initially, this trend started in the 20s when the figure changed from a normal woman's sort of hourglassy figure of the Edwardian and Victorian ages into a more tubular shaped body, very non-curvy body, straight up and down. Basically, the ideal woman in the 20s became a boy's body. Then later on, as the 30s rolled on, because of the austerity of the 30s, there was food shortages, and the same thing went on through World War II. So a more filled out figure became common for women, and this continued on into the 50s. Then in the 60s, everything changed when along came Twiggy. She was thin as a rail, probably from anorexia, but on further analysis, if you look at the length of her arms and the size and shape of her hands and the general overall proportions of her body, it is likely that she is a transgendered person as well as anorexic. So this looks like a male to female transgender. And so it went on through the 1970s with the hard, heavy facial features, and on through the 1980s with the business chic look and the hard body look that became more and more masculinized. And even more grotesque was the 90s with the Robert Palmer girl look, where almost all femininity was minimized to a stripped away emptiness. So fashion continued on, moving more and more into showing the ideal figure as a transgendered young male instead of a woman. Now bear in mind through all of this that anybody can get water balloons stapled to their chest. So here we are in the modern era, in our time where women are devoted to all kinds of diets and fasts and slim down techniques, liposuction, anything they can think of to try to achieve that ideal female figure, the young, androgynous, transgendered male look. And unless you think that this is like something that is just dreamed up, many of the models are now coming out as being transgender. They're openly admitting they're transgender now in the post-Caitlyn Jenner era. So what do we do in this era of fashion on a stick? I propose that we break away from this fashion on a stick, because this is the reason why women don't dress up anymore, because everything is designed for a body that is not theirs. So let's look back in the times when women were still shaped like women. The pre-World War I era, and we have some examples of that. The long-running BBC series Downton Abbey had some beautiful and actually even practical fashions shown in the series. And there's the Titanic movie. The fashions there were really nice. What could be more romantic than that? I know, all those clothes are lovely for dressing up nicely, but what about business attire? What do we have today? Today, the foundation for business fashion is the pencil skirt, which, if you're built like a real woman, will be too loose at the waist and too tight across the hips. It's great if you're a transgendered male because it wraps around you just like a loincloth. Also, the pencil skirt tends to hike up as you sit down, as shown in this picture of President Trump meeting Benjamin Netanyahu with their wives present, And as you can see, you pretty much have to cross your legs if you don't want to do a reenactment of Basic Instinct. Melania Trump does not have this problem with the pencil skirt, and the reason has been discussed by other YouTubers. So what's the answer? Well, if we look back at the time when women actually dressed like women, in other words, where the fashions fit their body shape, other than pre-war World War I fashions, you saw a resurgence of the normal female frame. The 30s were kind of going that direction, but it was a time of great austerity, so the fashions looked a little raggedy. However, in the 1940s, as the men were going to war and the women were going to work, we saw the emergence of a type of fashion that looked quite businesslike, but was shaped very nicely to the female figure, and it was very complementary. In the 1950s, though the women were all beginning to go back to the home because of the men were back from war, we still saw some very nice styles that would work in a business setting. So there you have some fashion choices. The 1910s, the 1940s, the 1950s. These are eras when women had fashions that were actually shaped to the women's body. And I would like to add one final thought about some of these fashions. They could be easily altered to maybe develop a new trend, but one of the key factors that you note in all of these fashions is there is a sense of modesty in them. And it's this modesty that actually is very appealing. When a woman is dressed like a woman and she's dressed very modestly, men find her very attractive. It's really funny, but it's true. If you try this out, you will see that men will notice you, men will see you. And so maybe consider this in deciding your fashions. However, I have one caveat. Most of these things you will not find in the store. Everything in the stores is geared towards this New York, Paris, Milan fashion designing to transgender males. So you're just probably going to have to sew it or get somebody to sew it for you, but you can get better materials and you can have things that are very classic and very lovely for many, many years. So there's some thoughts, consider it. And also I'm going to include some links about this transgender issue. It is part of this whole Illuminati conspiracy. And if you look at, I'll leave you some links in the comments area that show people who've done a greater analysis of transgendering and how it's been in our society for decades now. Okay, well anyway, some thoughts on fashion, and we'll talk about more interesting things in the future.